Hello again, my name is Arabella Vanderpool, and today I'm going to be talking to you about my second project for my Psych of Learning class. So, as you'll notice here, um, oh, little technical difficulties. My project is called The Amazing Gym. So, a couple things to note here is one, I'm working with Jim again. If you saw my last video and you know about my last project, you know I worked with a rat at the vivarium at Malone University named Jim. A couple things to know about Jim, background wise, before I get started. He's very clever. He's very smart. If he wants it, he'll go for it. But if he doesn't want something, he won't do it. He's a very prioritizing, motivated rat. If he wants something, he'll go for it. I can't force him to do things because then it's not something he wants all the time. So I have to finagle my way to working with him. Last project, I worked with him on seeing getting him to freeze, or at least attempting to get him to freeze. And we ran into some problems with that. But this one's a bit different. As the title implies, it's about a maze. This time I'm going to be having Jim go through a maze, but we'll get to these details later. So, my introduction. So, this second project is an operant instrumental conditioning paradigm. That kind of means we're doing a stimulus, then a response, then a stimulus. Basically, he's going to be there, and then I'm going to have a block in his way that he has to touch. His response to being there is to touch this block with his nose to keep going through the maze, in which this next stimulus is going to be me removing the block and also giving him a cookie. Now, I'll show you the setup here in a second, but I'm giving him Oreo pieces. Dr. Seifert at the vivarium at Malone University gives some of the rats little pieces of Oreo. Not a bunch, enough that it's like a little treat for them. And so this project, I gave him these pieces of Oreo to, kind of motivate him to be like, you get a sweet treat. And so my main priority was to get Jim to tap his nose to the block present, and then it'd be removed, and he'd get a cookie, and he can move on to the next set of blocks. So, this is the maze in question. I had him run around a little bit to get oriented with it, and you can see Jim here having a good time running around. And so the blocks in question are in the maze. These aren't exactly where all the blocks were, but this is kind of like an example of, Jim being in the maze. He had some time in the maze, he knew of the maze. He's had other experiments with himself and the maze, so therefore it wasn't a pure neutral stimulus, but he also hasn't done anything with the blocks and the maze. So I put blocks in, saw, hey, are these too tall? Are these not wide enough for the area? If you'll notice, there are 3 sections. It's almost divided in 2. The middle section was a bit wide, so I had a double block up, but most of the time I could use a singular block. Excuse me. Other than that, Jim he would start over, I'll show you more later, but overall, this is kind of the setup Jim was faced with. So, as you'll notice here, I put a start and a finish. You can kind of mental image, move everything around, but the red is where the blocks were, and the cookie pieces are where it's followed, and the arrows are kind of showing it to, go through and weave through. So, I got Jim familiar with the maze. He didn't seem like he liked going past what is shown here as past the second block. He didn't like that. Most of the blocks he didn't like going over, especially if there was like tripled up. If there was 3 blocks stacked on each other, he didn't like going by them. He didn't push past, nor did he decide to climb over. And so over time, first I started off with this paradigm And say, okay, you have all 5 cookies. You have to go and tap and move. And then over time, though, I took away the cookies. Another thing to note, though, first of all, these cookie pieces were very tiny. Um, they were like, this was about like this big. They weren't that big. They weren't like a full cookie. Most times he'd get a third of a cookie and he'd be sated with that. So I tried to take a third of a cookie for each paradigm and like break it up into smaller pieces and have it behind each block. So when he touched, he can move forward. And so what I also decided to do is over time, I also had the last cookie become bigger and larger, So then at some point, it would be supposedly that full third that he was used to. And yeah, until there would be no cookie. I didn't plan to do the no cookie trials for too long because, as mentioned earlier, if Jim doesn't get his way, he's not going to give me the best results in this. And that's exactly that kind of what happened. So let's talk about what happened. So at the very beginning, we had him getting used to the maze and the blocks. He didn't like the middle section of the maze. He didn't like the blocks. Perfect. It gives him even more of a reason. It gives me more of a reason to put the cookies behind each block. So then the first set of trials, which is 1 through 13, I wanted him to get used to the maze. Wanted him to get used to tapping his nose and keep moving. And thankfully, he got used to it after a while. It was confusing at first. A couple times I had to put him back in his carrier to kind of say, no, Jim, that's not what we're supposed to do. He didn't get his treat. Or he, with a couple of them, pushed the block or found a way to climb over it. Yeah. Not fun, not what we wanted, not what we expected. But that's Jim for us. Yeah. So after a few of these trials, he was going about 2-3 minutes. He would usually stop after every block, eat his cookie. Eventually, he got into a habit, when closer to the 2-minute time, of putting all the cookies in his mouth, getting to the end or close to the end, eating them, and then getting to the very end of the maze. He had to touch the block and grab the cookie for the experiment to be over. Then I'd let him run to the start again and I'd pick him up and put him in his carrier. So he would hoard the cookies all the way up to the end sometimes, which caused there to be more time, or he would stop periodically, eat a cookie, then continue. As the cookies started to go, I started one by one, as mentioned back in a previous slide of this, and going one by one. This is the exact order I took the cookies out, by the way. So keep that in mind. So when he started off his trial, he was very confused. He's like, where's my cookie at? What am I doing? I don't want to do this anymore. So he was a bit slower. He got closer to 2 minutes, though, because once he realized there's a cookie behind the other blocks, he got a lot faster. He didn't have as much cookie to hoard. As you'll notice, as the cookie starts to deplete, and though I didn't do as many tests because I started to realize that he'd do it without the cookie more, I started to do less and less trials, but he became less and less confused as time went by, and he went faster. Now, I think the reason he went slow in the first place was because he was taking that time to eat the cookie, because he would eat the cookie while completing the maze, so I counted that as the same time. Meanwhile, in this section, it shows that without the cookies, or at least without all the cookies except for the last one, he would go a lot faster. Now, the no cookie trials. I knew it was going to be problematic with this one. That's why I only did 3, because I knew that Jim would realize he's not getting his cookie anymore and more or less throw a tantrum. So the first trial, he didn't realize there was no cookie anymore until the end. So while doing his about 30-second trials, which were the fastest he did, he realized there's no cookie. I have no need to go fast anymore. I'm going to look for my cookies. So for the next 2 trials, he spent a minute or 2, even almost the 3, just looking for the cookies behind every single block. So he'd tap his nose, look for a cookie. In the second block, he'd tap his nose, and then he started to try climbing the sides, trying to lick the ground looking for a cookie. There was no cookie. He got to the third, the fourth, and the last one, realizing there's no cookies. So he was a bit frustrated, which is fair. But I also wanted to see how fast he would do without the cookies, showing that I probably should have spent more time um, with this and getting him to realize sometimes there's not cookies, sometimes there is, but for the most part, I tried to keep it pretty similar throughout the trials. So, my discussion as I move my computer a little bit. So, Jim is very smart. We knew this from the last paradigm. He's slightly greedy. He hoarded a bunch of the cookies in his mouth and tried to eat all of them at once. That was so fantastic to see. I was worried that if when I picked him up that he'd have more cookies to keep eating. Luckily he did not. He ate all of them in the maze. So that was a bit worrisome. I'm like, please don't get sated on cookies. I don't want to do too many trials within a day and then you get to have too much cookie because I can only cut the cookie in small enough pieces before he thinks they're just crumbs. He never got sated though. I think one day he seemed worn out, but that's about it. Yeah, he won't do anything without a reward. That's something to know about Jim as an individual. Some animals are a bit harder to sway. It's like food or nothing. And sometimes you have to put the foot down. For Jim, though, I tried to give him the best I could. I also tried throwing him curveballs to see how much can you adapt to the situation in which once he gets the hang of it, it's a lot easier. Um, yeah, him climbing over blocks was an interesting factor. And he's a little bit of an older rat too, so I wonder how a younger rat would fare. Also, he was faster when cookies were involved, and also like he was fast when the blocks were removed because he's like, okay, I can keep going, but so much more faster with a cookie. So that shows that a reward was very much wanted by Jim, and that even more of a reward was a great reward. That was a great stimuli. That was very positive. That was very positive. And then the block being that of a negative stimulus, taking it out. But yeah, so once he figured out there was a cookie, he'd try to figure out how to get to it. If he could see over the block, I think that's what I came to the conclusion on. If he could see over the block, then he would go for it more often. So, my conclusion, I love Jim. Jim has been a fantastic rat to work with. He's been very smart. I wish he had a longer lifespan so I could work with him more throughout the years. But I also know that I don't have anything to sustain him right now, and it makes me kind of sad because I don't want to leave him hanging. And he's been a great rat to work with, and I know he's been very smart throughout his life. And these trials have shown that to me, at least, been more or less my solid proof. And so, yeah, I was very happy to work with Jim. I was very happy I could put him through the ringer with his maze. I jokingly said in my last video that I wanted to throw him in a maze and teach him a lesson because he put me through it in the first paradigm, but we have gone through it and I got some amazing pictures. I wish I in the moment wasn't worrying about apartments so I could, do more with him and take a photo with him. I wish I could have done that. I probably still have time to um, this next week as finals approach, but at least for this video's purposes, since this is due not too long from now, that I wanted to at least show you the pictures I had of him, which I can go back real quick and show him in his little maze. We, as humans, sometimes are always told. Now, I know this isn't part of the project, but I think for educational purposes, I should put this in. In this class so far of Psych of Learning, we are taught that everything has a capability of learning, whether it's ants, rats, humans, anybody. How they learn is going to be different, and some things are easier. Some, like individuals, are easier to teach than others. Some you can get along with and you understand their types of learning, while others are a bit more finical, and it feels like a struggle because they're giving you a pushback. But everything in its own right is smart. And I've had a couple of students come up to me, specifically one, which I won't name, but come up to me and say, well, how smart is this animal? I've heard they're pretty stupid. No, that's not true. For anyone watching this video, every animal has the capacity to learn. Everything has the capacity to learn. You just need to know how. Now, with Jim, I didn't know how to communicate with him. I didn't know what could strike his interest, but communication is not just the words, it's the actions, it's the drive you have to communicate, it's the want to do so. Now, it's not like Jim and I had a secret language. No, the way Jim and I would communicate is I'd pet him, I'd tell him he's a good boy, and then have him do a paradigm, and then give him rewards. And if he did badly or poorly, I would put him in his carry-on, the carrier enclosure thing, to say, hey, that wasn't right. We got to do it better. But he was very smart. He was smarter than some animals and or people I've worked with. But he's a very good rat. Greedy and very food motivated, but a very smart, intelligent rat. And so I just wanted to come on here and either for Psych of Learning reasons in my class, or just to educate anyone who is watching to tell you that it's sometimes a fight, but it's worth it. If you put forth effort and it's going to benefit both parties in the end, I think it's worth it to talk to one another and figure out how. Or even find a way to communicate, whether it's food and a paradigm, which I've been told to try Dr. Seifert. Jim is always wanting to get out and run in the maze, or it is also just taking time and finding the ways to communicate with one another, because we're all human and we all are going through something, and it's not right to assume that somebody knows more all the time than another person, or has control of everything more than other people do. I've seen this today, and it takes patience, it takes consideration, and it takes drive. I mean, most paradigms do. So that's enough of me ranting. Thank you for watching my video of Jim and I's trials and the amazing Jim. I hope you laughed at that. And yeah, thank you so much. Thank you to Dr. Seifert at the Vivarium for giving me this opportunity to work with Jim. Thank you, Malone University, for funding and helping the Vivarium grow, and giving students the opportunity to do experiments like this, more or less paradigms. And thank you, Jim, the rat. Probably won't watch this, but thank you for helping me and helping me get a better understanding of the psychology of learning. So thank you to all who have watched, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.